Hello everyone, welcome to the art studio. I'm set up to work on a sculpture today. It's a rainy day here in Tirana, Albania, so I think it's a good day to be hanging around the art studio. Let's take a look at the project and what I'm going to be working on. So this is the type of sculpture I'm going to be creating today. You may have seen it in the previous process video. This will be the second type of sculpture I've created with the spun cotton like this, and I'm hoping to refine the process a little bit more. The original sculpture here was created around an empty plastic juice bottle, and I used rice and salt in the bottom to weight it, but it kind of, I don't know if you can hear the sound. It makes a shaking noise. So with this particular piece, I've already started it and I'll show the stages in just a moment. I'm using a glass bottle as a base for the cotton, and then I'm going to build up the figure around it. But with the spun cotton, it has to be done in layers, and it takes about a day or so in between each layer to dry. So this particular figure is going to be part of the Deconstruction Home Artist Residency, and it's going to feature essentially a figure holding a pot on its head. And the idea here is the recipe or the ingredients for what helps compose our identity. And sort of dissecting identity and what the parts of it are, what is that recipe for what creates our identity, and we'll be approaching those questions as we work on the piece. I'm going to show you the beginning portion of how I created and got to the stage and video in just a moment, but I have my basic supplies with me. This is a cheap makeup brush. I have cotton. These are just cotton that you can buy at any pharmacy or grocery store. I've got two types here. This one is done in like a sheet, but I also have cotton balls, and I have the homemade cornstarch glue. I am planning to use this can to create the pot that is going to rest on her head. And I've got some wire here, which will be used to help create some of the armature and the legs. So let's get started with the video process. This time, instead of using a discarded plastic bottle, I'm using a glass bottle. It's a glass Coca-Cola bottle that I have washed out with just soap and warm water, and then I let it dry completely. I contemplated removing the label, but what I found is that sometimes it helps to have a bit of a label, even if you scrub off parts of it, to give the cotton something to begin to stick to, because the glass is a slick surface. You can get the glass to, the cotton to wrap around the glass, but sometimes it is a little difficult and it wants to bunch up. So having the label on there was actually helpful for me. And this will give the basic shape for the structure of the body of the figure. I want to cover it with a solid layer, and I had started off using the round cotton balls. And what I found is that it's easier to use the sheet. You get better coverage, and it's an even layer, whereas the cotton balls are not always an even layer of cotton. So if you do try to do this on your own at home, experiment with whether or not you want to use, the round cotton ball or the sheet. Both have the ability to be a good tool or asset while you're working with the spun cotton. I'm also going to experiment later on with some larger medical grade cotton sheets. So we'll see how, the different materials work for me. But the whole goal as I do each sculpture each time is to refine the process a little bit, and to learn more about the materials that I'm working with and what I can do with them. And again, I've seen a few videos of people making spun cotton Christmas ornaments, but it's one thing to watch somebody make something, and it's another thing to experiment with it yourself. So once I had a complete layer of cotton over the bottle, I decided I wanted to add the head. When I had done this the first time, I used a ball of paper with tinfoil. It wasn't very smooth and it was very hard to get a smooth sculpt over the top of it. After watching a video of someone making a spun cotton Christmas ornament, they used a ball of cotton as the base for their head, and I decided to experiment with that here. So I took a cotton ball, elongated part of it to make it more egg-shaped, and then I am just using sheets of the cotton to start that head-shaped layer. Because the cotton is soft, I can push it down and form it and get it rounder. And I'm hoping this will provide a very smooth head shape for me to sculpt the face on. Now that I have the basic structure of the figure, I'm starting to think about how I want to place things. I'm going to have three faces similar to the first sculpture that I did, but I'm debating about how I want to do the face. Are there changes I wanted to make? How I want to do the hair. Um, a couple of things that were different when I did the first one, I had initially wanted to do like fabric or crocheted or stitched hair. But because the sculpture had hardened so much, I was not able to do that, and I ended up having to sculpt the hair. When I'm looking at this, it's still very pliable. So in the thought of experimentation, I thought maybe I'll see if I can stitch it. I was looking at this image on Pinterest of a doll's face. I think you can see there's a needle going through. Basically, they are stitching into it to create the basic structure for the face, and there is a bridged nose there. So I'm wondering if I could give some definition to the face with a few stitches at this point. So I'm going to experiment with that, keeping in mind that as I add additional layers of cotton, it's going to thicken and expand. So I don't know if any of the stitching will show. I don't know if stitched hair is going to be a possibility, but this is the point where you can kind of see this is still very pliable, and this would be the point to experiment with refining different techniques for that. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to start adding in the arms and legs, and trying to think about how I want to finish posing the sculpture itself. So for this stage, I used a dark thread so you can see what I'm doing. I'm trying to follow along with the directions I had found on the website, but I'm noticing that parts of the sculpture, though they're pliable, are still difficult to stitch through. It seems that how much glue was on each section, can't talk, influences how easy it is to stitch. So you definitely want a very sharp needle if you're going to try to do this. And I don't know how effective this is going to end up being. I'm probably going to sculpt over it a little bit. The second part of where I had the sculpture, when I moved to the next section, um, it ripped a little bit. So the glue was not as thick there, and everything was extremely delicate, and I was just pulling the thread almost through. I did manage to get it secure. It has a somewhat defined look to it, but I'm not sure, like the eye indentations aren't really showing. Um, all of that's going to be sculpted in. We'll see if this was an effective stage or an unnecessary one as I move through. What I did learn though is that if I want to add anything to the sculpture, anything that hangs or anything that might be stitched on, like I was thinking of hair or something like that, or if I wanted to add wire in, this is the spot where I could do that. I could stitch it into any portions of the sculpture or the figure base that are pliable. So the next step is going to be for me to add the arms and the legs to the sculpture. And I'm going to use this wire from Benecraft. You could use any wire that you wanted to, but this is specifically used for doll making. It's a decent gauge and thickness, but it's very easy to use. You can see I've wrapped it around the base of the sculpture here. I could cut the wire and make 2 even lengths for legs, but by wrapping it around the bottle, it's going to provide more stability. It's also going to prevent the arms and legs from easily being broken off. That will all be covered with a base of cotton. You'll see in just a moment. But what I'm going to do at this stage also is try to figure out where the legs are going to sit. Is she going to be sitting on the edge of something? I know it's a little hard to see there. You know, are the legs going to be bent and hanging down like off the edge of the shelf? Is she going to be sitting on the table itself, which is what I ultimately decide to do? And where are the legs and feet going to be positioned? So this is basically like I'm creating the beginnings of her skeleton. Once I have a general idea, I'm going to start with a few thin layers of cotton. I'm using the sheets. The sheets of cotton will give better coverage for me, and I'm trying to also tighten the wire as much as I can around the bottle. At this stage, the wire is still somewhat adjustable. And I'm sorry it goes a little bit off screen here. I was busy working and not paying attention to camera position. But it will still be somewhat adjustable. There will be a certain point where there will be enough layers of cotton on that I can no longer move the legs very much. But at this stage, I'll still have a little bit adjustability as I work on the sculpture and decide, you know, where everything is placed. I have to work in stages and let parts of it dry a little bit at a time. And so how quickly I create a sculpture is going to depend very much on drying time. When I was living in Abu Dhabi, that could take 3 to 7 days. So it was very slow work. Now that I'm in Tirana, I'm finding it's taking 1 to 3 days, depending on how many layers and how wet the cotton is. So that means I can work a little more quickly on the sculptures. And it's winter right now. Perhaps in the summer, I might even be able to work more quickly if I can put things out on the patio here to dry in the sun and the heat. But for now, this is how I'm working, and you'll see that I'm just going to put a little bit on the edges here. I'm not going to cover the legs yet because, again, once it's dry, I'm going to start I'm going to put the arms on and then begin sculpting the face, and then I'll make some adjustments before I do the arms and the legs. Okay, so it only took overnight to dry, and that means I can continue working today. You can see right here, I've pulled it away a little bit. I think when I was doing this, I wasn't paying attention too much to the faces. And I've also, when I made the faces, all of the noses are not on the same level. I can correct that when I am doing the sculpts, but I don't know at this point that stitching these in was very beneficial, other than to discover the fact that I could at this stage do some stitching. So I've played around a little bit with the leg placement. You can see for the most part, it's still a little bit wobbly, and that will change over time, but it is because I wrapped it around the bottle fairly secured on here. If I'm not careful, I could completely pull it off. You can see it's starting to pull away here. So I'll add a couple layers here today when I am adding in the arms, but I need to also cut the shape for the pot so that I put that on the head and I have an idea where everything is going to be placed. So I'm not sure if the arms in the pot are going to be two different drying stages or if I'll be able to do it all in one go. Let's get the materials to do that and get started. I like to harvest the metal from soda cans. In this case, it's a can of lemonade. This one seems about the right size to make the pot. So I have washed this out with a little bit of dish soap and water. And now I'm just using a box cutter to carefully cut in a circular shape around the can. You have to be careful when you do this because you can get these kind of jagged little edges, and this is just a pair of kitchen shears that I keep for this purpose, but you can get these kind of jagged little edges if you're not careful. You can see one of the edges here, and when you're cutting, these can end up easily on the floor. So I always do this in a way to make careful that I can toss these out and none of my cats or my family is going to step on them. I've not been cut by the cans when I'm working with them, but you do want to take care. So this is just going to go on the top of the figure's head, and I'm just trying to make sure the lip of it is very even and doesn't have any of those little jagged edges. It looks like this will be the right size for what I'm intending to do with this project. I had thought that I got all of the water out of the can, but I guess it wasn't dry enough. I do want to take the rest of the can. This is normally what I do with it. I normally cut up, I find a line on the can and cut it so that I can make a sheet of metal. The sheet is curled a little bit, but I can flatten it under some books, or I can run it through, like, I have like a Sizzix die cut machine, and I can then flatten it a little bit, use it for other embellishments, use it for collage, use it to make little tags and things that I can use in my collage or in other projects. And that's what I'm going to save it for. The next stage is to add the arms. I'll be using the wire again. I need to place it in such a way that it's secured to the bottle, but I also have the right length to accommodate for the hands and where the figure will be holding this. This is going to be a pot that she'll be holding on her head. So once I figure that out, I can wrap the wire around the bottle, cut off the length that I think I'll need for the other arm. Hopefully I have the length correct. And then I am going to secure the wire to the bottle with the cotton and the cornstarch glue mixture. The first stage of the sculpture is complete. I have a base figure that I can use to build the sculpture on with the spun cotton. The next videos will feature me building the sculpture itself, so stay tuned to the channel for those. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.